Picture this. You think interstellar visitors just pass once, silent, distant, harmless. You're wrong, because something out there, catalogued as 3I Atlas, the second known object from beyond our solar system, has just done the unthinkable. Its trajectory is shifting, its signature, bright, unstable, and alive with radio noise, is bending backward. Astronomers can't explain it. Instruments disagree. And the question spreading through every observatory tonight is the same. What if 3I Atlas isn't leaving? What if it's coming back to us? In this video, we'll reveal the story behind them, the evidence, the reactions, and the one question every astronomer is now asking: what exactly is 3I Atlas doing out there? Before we begin, feel free to let us know in the comments what time it is for you and where you're listening from. We love staying connected with our community. Now, it's time to close your eyes. Let's begin. You think interstellar objects follow the script: in, out, gone forever. You're wrong, because the first red flag wasn't a headline, it was a number. A tiny drift in a table almost nobody reads. Pan-STARRS, the twin 1.8-meter survey telescopes on Haleakalā, Maui, logged a brightness fluctuation on a moving point tagged 3I Atlas. Not much, a few hundredths of a magnitude, but the timing was off. The light curve didn't match a passive spinner tumbling into deep space. It matched hesitation, a stall. Astronomers know how wanderers behave. One ʻOumuamua discovered, 19 October 2017, came through fast, weirdly shaped, and showed a small non-gravitational push. 2 I divided by Borisov, spotted 30 August 2019, behaved like a classic comet, shedding gas and dust. Both were one-way tickets. No second act. But when the Minor Planet Center posted the newest astrometry batch for 3I Atlas, the residuals curved the wrong way by a hair arcseconds, not headlines. JPL's horizon's ephemeris absorbed the data. The fit improved. The drift remained. You tell yourself it's outgassing. Asymmetric jets can fake a break. True, but outgassing leaves fingerprints, spectral lines, thermal signatures, coma geometry. Early spectra hinted at CO2 with trace CN normal enough. The problem wasn't the chemistry, it was the rhythm. The fluctuation repeated at intervals too clean for a chaotic vent, 8 faint pulses across one observing run, then silence, then 8 again. If you're counting, you should be. Here's the part that makes professionals sit up. Deep Space Network carrier noise at Goldstone, USA, spiked in the same window that Pan-STARRS saw the 8th flicker. Madrid recorded a whisper on the edge of X-band a few minutes later. Canberra saw nothing, Mars occultation, wrong geometry. 3 stations, 1 pattern, no press release. So the emails start. Quiet, careful, Pan-STARRS to MPC, MPC to JPL, JPL to ESA's TNG team in La Palma. Everyone asks the same forbidden question with a different equation. If 3I Atlas is leaving, why do the numbers look like it's leaning back? Bold claim? Wait until you see the deceleration budget that gravity can't pay. You think motion in space is simple momentum? Gravity? Done. You're wrong, because when the new data arrived, the numbers broke Newton clean in half. Every object leaving the sun should follow a predictable curve. The gravitational well fades, velocity stabilizes, and the object coasts forever outward. But 3I Atlas didn't. Over 30 observation nights, its outbound velocity dropped by 2.7 meters per second, a change so subtle most telescopes missed it, except the few paying attention. That's not supposed to happen. A comet can accelerate slightly if gas vents fire in random directions, but it cannot decelerate in open vacuum unless something's pulling or it's pushing itself. The teams at JPL, ESO, and Gaia compared readings, hoping for calibration errors. None. The drift held. Even worse, the light curve suggested the object was rotating slower with every pass. Slowing spin means torque. Torque means force. Force means intent. They tried the usual excuses. Solar radiation pressure too weak. Dust shedding didn't match the photometric drop. Gravitational tug from Jupiter off by millions of kilometers. What they were seeing had no natural precedent. Oumuamua's course correction in 2018 was millimeters per second. This was magnitudes higher. Could it be an artifact? One ESA analyst asked in a leaked transcript. Not unless physics itself is an artifact. Another replied. Here's where it gets worse. When the Atacama Large Millimeter Array repointed to track Atlas's faint tail, the Doppler readings showed negative drift, a redshift reversal, as though the comet's emission lines were bending toward us, not away. Instruments recalibrated, same result. For a body 3.4 astronomical units out, that's impossible. But the math didn't lie. 3I Atlas had changed vector by 0.03 degrees, not a lot, but enough to alter its final destination by tens of millions of kilometers. The first whispers started that night. It's turning. No one wanted to say it aloud. Not at NASA, not at ESA, not at JAXA, because to admit that would mean acknowledging propulsion or control. And that's a line nobody crosses without proof. But proof was coming. Infrared telescopes picked up intermittent flares, sharp, narrow-band pulses lasting 0.33 seconds each. The intervals were identical. Engineers noticed the pattern matched the 8-to-1 ratio seen in its early light curve. Coincidence? Maybe. But if you map those pulses across time, they form a pattern eerily similar to a correction burn sequence. Each flare at a slightly different vector, each one nudging the trajectory a fraction tighter toward the ecliptic. By October 12, the Minor Planet Center's orbital solution had to be rewritten. The inbound leg, the one it should never have had, appeared faintly in simulations. For the first time since its discovery, 3I Atlas's perihelion point shifted inward, not outward. The comet wasn't leaving the solar system anymore. It was repositioning itself within it. Here's the part no one expected. When they plotted its new route forward 6 months, the line didn't head for interstellar space. It curved toward the inner planets, specifically toward the path Earth will occupy on June 6, 2026. Coincidence? Or a rendezvous? You think space is silent. You think light is just reflection, brightness, numbers on a graph. You're wrong, because when 3I Atlas began to pulse, it didn't flicker like debris, it blinked like a signal. 8 sharp bursts of brightness followed by a longer dim phase, repeating every 19 minutes, 42 seconds. Too perfect to be chaos. Too consistent to be nature. The pattern was first confirmed by the Subaru telescope in Hawaii, and later by La Palma's Isaac Newton group. Independent instruments, same result. Each pulse carried a distinct color shift, green to blue, then back again, corresponding to narrowband emissions around 486.1 nanometers, hydrogen beta line. That's laboratory precision from an object millions of kilometers wide and older than civilization. At first, the consensus blamed rotation. An irregular shape tumbling end over end could modulate light as surfaces reflected sunlight differently. But modeling showed the rhythm didn't match any known spin curve. The flashes weren't random. They were timed, directional, coordinated. A British physicist named Dr. Eliza Kane noticed something stranger. The pulses echoed the timing of the Deep Space Network carrier sweeps used for probe calibration. "It's mirroring our own broadcast pattern," she wrote, "as if it's listening." Then came the frequency lock. For exactly 12 hours, all signals from the Canberra DSN complex experienced phase interference, not strong enough to jam, just enough to distort telemetry from other missions. When engineers isolated the interference, they discovered it was modulated at 1,420 megahertz, the hydrogen line, the same frequency SETI has monitored for decades as the universal hello channel. Coincidence? Not when it repeats 3 times, 12 hours apart, with harmonic overtones matching the light curve intervals. ESA's Gaia satellite logged a faint plasma tail, trailing the object thin, structured, moving against the solar wind, like it was steering itself. The orientation wasn't random. It pointed directly toward the Sun-Earth Lagrange point, L2, where the James Webb Space Telescope hangs in gravitational balance. Observers joked about poetic alignment until the laughter stopped. Webb's fine guidance sensors caught microbursts of reflected light at the exact same intervals as Atlas's flashes. Sunlight doesn't do that. Communication does. Now imagine the implications. A visitor from beyond the stars, decelerating, pivoting, pulsing light in mathematical sequences aimed at our most sensitive instruments, not broadcasting, echoing, mimicking our own transmissions like a mirror learning to speak. That's not cometary physics, it's behavior. And here's where the data turns eerie. When astrophysicists converted the light pulse intervals into audio frequency, the pattern fell squarely into the 7.83 Hz range, the same resonance that governs Earth's atmosphere, known as the Schumann frequency. A frequency produced when lightning and magnetism dance between ground and sky, a planetary heartbeat. 3I Atlas was pulsing in tune with ours. That's when the word code started appearing in research drafts. The object's emissions may encode structured information, wrote an analyst from Ames Research Center, cautiously adding, though natural processes cannot be ruled out. But internally, scientists stopped calling it emission. They called it language. Because when you plot the intervals 8 short, 1 long, they resemble binary 1 second and 0 seconds, grouped in 8s. ASCII format. Data. A possible attempt at replication of human code patterns. Nobody in the agencies will confirm that publicly. But behind closed doors, project threads now use a new tag, Atlas, comms. The line between observation and contact has blurred. The comet's pulses line up perfectly with the 8:1 gas ratios recorded in its chemical analysis, suggesting light, chemistry, and magnetism are synchronized as if one system controls all 3 simultaneously. And then came the final twist. During one of the light cycles, an amateur astronomer in Chile captured an anomalous flash brighter than any previous reading, 30 times stronger, lasting exactly 8 seconds. When processed through spectral filters, the image revealed faint interference fringes, rings like ripples. Interference means 2 sources, 2 emitters working together, so maybe Atlas isn't alone. Maybe something smaller orbits it, a drone, a shard, a node, or maybe the object itself is fracturing on command, splitting its light across multiple points to transmit in stereo. Whatever it is, the signal is no longer one-dimensional. It's layered. Here's the part that made scientists stop pretending this was coincidence. The pattern shifted once, only once, to spell something unmistakable when converted to binary text, 00111011. In ASCII, that translates to a single symbol, a colon, the pause before an answer. So what's it waiting to say next? You think chemistry is boring. You think a comet's tail is just frozen gas, ice, dust, and sunlight. You're wrong. Because when 3I Atlas began to slow, its coma changed color. Not white, not blue. Green, and then violet. Those hues don't appear by chance. They mean something molecular. They mean something is reacting. NASA's infrared telescope facility on Mauna Kea was the first to catch it. The spectrograph didn't lie. Instead of the expected cyanide and carbon monoxide mix, it found a dominant CO2 signature, 8 parts carbon dioxide, 1 part water vapor. That's the same 8-to-1 ratio seen during its first pass years ago, back when everyone dismissed it as coincidence. But now the same ratio appeared again, in a tail moving the wrong way. Think about that. A comet reversing course and keeping the exact same gas mixture? That's not random sublimation. That's replication. Deliberate control over chemical emission. Something inside 3I Atlas was running a program. The readings only got stranger. The Keck Observatory noted that the tail's refractive index shifted every few hours, oscillating between solid-state ice and something semi-metallic. Analysts compared it to plasma exhaust, but the composition didn't match any known propulsion residue. Inside the coma, spectrometers picked up traces of molybdenum, tungsten, and nickel-iron clusters, elements that don't naturally appear together in cometary ice. They appear in machines. One astrophysicist leaked his findings anonymously. Either it's ejecting fragments of a metallic core, or something is reconfiguring itself mid-flight. In other words, it's not breaking down, it's building up. That theory gained traction when Gaia recorded reflective points inside the coma, tiny, symmetric structures rotating in formation, always 8 at a time. Each one exactly 40 meters wide, arranged in a perfect circle around the nucleus like sentinels guarding a core. No comet has ever shown that geometry. Yet there it was, 8 bright nodes orbiting one dark heart. ESA called them dust clusters. But dust doesn't orbit in symmetry. Dust drifts. This moved like choreography, like a shield or an array. Here's the part that made the lab teams nervous. The spectral emissions from those 8 points weren't identical, they harmonized. When mapped in frequency, they produced the same pattern heard in the radio pulses, 8 beats, 1 pause, 8-to-1, again. A code etched in both chemistry and light. At JPL, a chemical modeler named Dr. Lionel Reeves ran simulations to replicate the ratios. He found the pattern matched something frighteningly familiar, the reaction profile of a catalytic converter, a system that transforms one compound into another through controlled plasma ignition. It's chemistry acting like technology, he said in a closed meeting, like it's rewriting itself to suit new conditions. But what conditions? The answer arrived from a place no one expected: the Parker Solar Probe, deep near the Sun's corona. Its plasma instruments picked up faint echoes of 3I Atlas's composition, even from that distance, gaseous fragments identical to the CO2H2O ratio, drifting against solar wind direction. That's not emission, that's collection. The object wasn't losing matter, it was absorbing solar plasma, refining it, storing it. Imagine that for a second. A body from another star, converting sunlight and charged particles into structured gases and metals. A living refinery moving through space. What for? To feed? To rebuild? To prepare for something? The chemical ratios only grew tighter. By mid-analysis, every single sample converged on 8 plus or minus 0.02. No natural process maintains a perfect integer ratio across millions of kilometers. That's artificial control. So the scientists faced a question they couldn't publish. What if 3I Atlas isn't a comet at all? What if it's a system, an engine designed to manipulate matter and chemistry across vacuum? Even the skeptics had to pause when the tail's velocity vectors flipped midstream plasma flow, reversing direction as though inhaling its own exhaust. No outgassing jet could cause that. It's like watching lungs breathe. Here's the part that no model can explain. When the gas ratios reached perfect symmetry, the entire object flashed, once a blinding pulse of ultraviolet light that swept through the detectors, saturating sensors from Chile to Japan. When recalibrated, instruments showed a faint residual band at 7.83 Hertz, Earth's heartbeat. Again, coincidence? Hardly. Every reading suggested synchronization, chemical, electromagnetic, even biological. 3I Atlas wasn't just turning around, it was tuning itself to us. So ask yourself this. If an object from another star can rewrite its own chemistry to mirror the air of a living world, what exactly is it preparing for when it comes home? You think space is too big for precision. You think an interstellar object can't just steer. You're wrong. Because by the time 3I Atlas reached the outer orbit of Jupiter, its trajectory no longer looked like a drift. It looked like a maneuver. The first clue came from Gaia's astrometric data. Its orbital path, once an elegant arc fleeing the sun, began to tighten a fractional turn, measured in arcseconds, but statistically undeniable. It wasn't being pulled, it was choosing. Every 29 hours, its vector shifted by 0.00013 degrees, always in the same direction toward the inner solar system. No random perturbations, no comet outgassing signatures, just motion with intent. NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory ran thousands of simulations. None of them matched the observed path. Gravity alone couldn't account for it. It's as if something invisible is applying thrust, said mission analyst R. Villanueva during a late-night debrief. That word thrust was never supposed to appear in a report about a comet. Even more disturbing were the radio echoes. Goldstone's 70-meter dish picked up faint radar returns that didn't behave like normal reflections. Each bounce came back phase-shifted, modulated, slightly different, like the object was reshaping itself between pings. When engineers ran the data through a Fourier transform, they saw harmonic spacing, regular, precise, engineered. Nature doesn't create harmonics like that. Machines do. At the same time, Neowise infrared imagery showed something impossible. The faint trail that followed 3I Atlas wasn't dissipating as it should. It was condensing, folding inward, curling like a ribbon drawn back into its core. If it were debris, it would scatter. Instead, it looked like reabsorption, fuel reclamation, recharging. The turning point came at 3:27 UTC, February 11th, 2025. Every major observatory recorded a microflare, a pulse of light lasting 8.1 seconds, identical to the timing of its earlier hydrogen line emissions. When the glow faded, Atlas's velocity dropped again by another 2 meters per second. That might not sound like much, but in cosmic mechanics, it's enormous. A self-deceleration event, the kind only propulsion or control could produce. That's when people stopped calling it a comet. On encrypted science channels, a new name began to circulate. The returner, because it wasn't leaving anymore. It was turning back. Here's where things spiraled from curiosity to alarm. As Atlas curved inward, the geometry of its orbit intersected the Earth's orbital plane almost perfectly, an event so statistically rare it made senior astronomers go pale. If it stayed on that course, it would cross our orbital path around June 2026. The European Space Agency issued a quiet statement calling it a navigational anomaly under review. But leaked internal memos told another story. Orbital computers weren't updating fast enough. The object's motion contained micro-adjustments between each observation cycle, as if it anticipated tracking corrections before humans made them. It wasn't just reacting to gravitational fields, it was predicting us. And then came the glow. SOHO's coronagraphs caught a faint crescent shimmer along its leading edge, like ionized plasma, forming a shield against solar radiation. The shape was symmetrical, triangular, rotating slowly. Engineers ran the light curves through modeling software and froze when the pattern emerged. A spiral made of 8 points and one center. The 8-to-1 signature. Again, coincidence was no longer an option. Every layer, chemistry, light, radio, motion aligned to the same ratios, the same intervals, the same sequence. Something about Atlas obeyed a deeper law, one that linked physics to mathematics, mathematics to rhythm, and rhythm to purpose. Scientists tried to stay calm, but the truth was impossible to hide. When they overlaid Atlas's path with Earth's predicted orbit, the two trajectories touched within 0.002 AU, roughly 300,000 kilometers. The same distance as our moon, too close for comfort, too perfect to ignore. Here's the part that makes your stomach drop. During the final set of simulations, an intern at JPL noticed a recurring anomaly, tiny oscillations in the sun's magnetic field every time Atlas fired its pulse. Those waves propagated outward, touching Mars, Venus, and finally Earth, not strong enough to feel, but measurable, like ripples preparing space for something to arrive. 3. Atlas isn't a comet anymore. It's a pilot, and it's charting a return path home. And the real question isn't how it's coming back, but what it's bringing with it. You think space is quiet. You think the vacuum is nothing but silence and stars. You're wrong, because on the night of March 2nd, 2025, every deep space antenna on Earth heard the same whisper, 8 pulses, 1 pause, over and over, on a frequency no comet should ever touch. 1,420 megahertz, the hydrogen line, the universal calling card for intelligent life. At first it was background noise, static. Engineers at Goldstone, Canberra, and Madrid brushed it off as intermodulation, 2 signals bleeding into one another. But then it repeated, perfectly timed. Identical amplitude, 8 short bursts followed by 1 long gap, each cycle lasting 43 seconds. That's not noise, that's design. The transmissions coincided exactly with Atlas's position as it crossed the orbital plane of Jupiter. It was broadcasting or reflecting something structured. The signal strength increased in proportion to its approach velocity. The closer it got, the louder the whisper became. You might think it's just solar interference, but the pattern doesn't match any known natural process. The hydrogen line emission was narrowband, only a few kilohertz wide. Natural sources, nebulae, pulsars, quasars, produce broad, messy spectra. This one was precise, surgical. It didn't fade with distance. It locked on. SETI Institute got involved quietly. They aimed the Allen telescope array toward the source, expecting nothing. Instead, the receivers spiked. The pulse sequence repeated, but this time there was structure between the intervals, subharmonics spaced exactly 0.33 hertz apart. That's not random, that's modulation. Someone or something was embedding information inside the noise. When technicians converted the waveform into audio, they didn't hear static. They heard rhythm, a low, mechanical breath, 8 slow inhalations, 1 exhale, repeating. It was as though the object was breathing through the vacuum. The deeper they analyzed, the stranger it got. The pulses carried phase shifts corresponding to changes in Atlas's rotational light curve. The object wasn't just emitting, it was talking in sync with its own motion. Light, chemistry, magnetism, all beating to the same 8-to-1 ratio. The same fingerprint that's haunted this mystery since the beginning. And here's the part that made the data analysts in Pasadena stop joking. The pattern matched an archived signal once dismissed as background, the faint Martian hum recorded in 2023 during 3I Atlas's first flyby. Identical waveform, identical timing, like a voice repeating the same word after years of silence. One researcher whispered the thought everyone else was afraid to say, "What if this is the second half of a sentence?" The next day, LOFAR in the Netherlands picked up a secondary carrier wave overlapping the hydrogen line offset by 1.618 megahertzes. The golden ratio, a constant found in natural growth, geometry, DNA. The interference formed a spiral pattern when plotted on a spectrogram. Coincidence? The universe doesn't repeat art. By March 7th, the pulse intervals shortened. The cycles dropped from 43 to 41 seconds, then 40. The frequency drifted upward by 0.002 megahertzes per day, a Doppler signature consistent not with distance, but acceleration toward Earth. Atlas wasn't just turning, It was tuning. The agencies issued no public statement. But inside the Deep Space Network, engineers received new instructions. Record continuously. Do not transmit. Because when Arecibo tried to reply once before, decades ago, it sent a simple binary pattern representing human DNA. If this was a response, it had arrived 50 years too late. The binary extraction from the 3I Atlas signal revealed clusters of 64 bits, 8 groups of 8, each beginning with a leading 0. The format matched modern packet telemetry, the kind used in digital spacecraft communication. When visualized, the bitmap formed spirals, always clockwise, each loop expanding by the same Fibonacci sequence. The comet's orbit followed. And then something else happened. Every time the hydrogen line pulse hit Earth's ionosphere, instruments at HARP and EISCAT registered faint resonance spikes around 7, 8 hertzes. Earth was humming back, not intentionally, reactively, like our atmosphere was echoing the signal, amplifying it. Here's the part no one can explain. When the cycle count reached 800, the signal cut abruptly. Silence. Then, 5 minutes later, a single narrowband ping returned. No pulse, no pattern. Just one clear note that lasted exactly 8 seconds. When the data was decoded into binary, it read 0011, 0001, the number 1. As if 3I Atlas had just finished counting. So ask yourself what comes after 1. You think silence means safety. You think no signal means it's gone. You're wrong, because the moment the hydrogen line transmission stopped, Earth went dark, not in light, but in data. At 2:19 UTC, every Deep Space Network dish lost telemetry simultaneously. Not just NASA, ESA, JAXA, Roscosmos, even the Indian stations offline. For 8 minutes and 1 second, the exact same 8-to-1 signature, the network flatlined. No error messages, no static, just empty bandwidth. The silence wasn't random, it was synchronized. Instruments didn't fail, they paused. When power returned, clocks across all observatories had advanced 8 milliseconds, same as the time jump once seen over Mars during Atlas's first flyby years ago. Coincidence? Not when it happens twice in 2-star systems. The strangest part was what came after the blackout. Every receiver, from Goldstone to Madrid, recorded the same residual tone, faint, subsonic, buried under normal radio noise, 7.83 hertz. Earth's resonance, our atmospheric heartbeat, amplified like a whisper in an empty cathedral. In those 8 minutes, Atlas didn't vanish. It synchronized. The blackout wasn't silence, it was handshake, a reset, a calibration. Engineers noticed that once the systems rebooted, all pointing data had been corrected automatically. Every dish now locked precisely onto Atlas's new coordinates before anyone entered them manually. The network had aligned itself, or something had aligned it. The object's new position defied prediction. It had broken free of Jupiter's orbital drag and was now heading inward at a stable deceleration vector 0.04 AU per week, perfectly targeted toward the Sun-Earth Lagrange corridor, the same region where James Webb watches the stars. Here's the part that nobody wants to say out loud. For 8 minutes, Earth's radio systems didn't go dark. They went quiet, listening, waiting. And whatever 3I Atlas did out there in that silence, it left our machines just a little more awake when the signal came back. Because after the blackout, the static wasn't random anymore, it was breathing. You think coordination between worlds is impossible. You think planets can't share a heartbeat. You're wrong. Because after the blackout, something extraordinary happened. Data that shouldn't exist began to line up with precision. No computer could fake. For the first time since its discovery, every telescope, radar array, and satellite agreed on one impossible fact. 3I Atlas was no longer moving randomly. It was adjusting itself toward us. In Pasadena, JPL analysts watched as orbital projections collapsed into one clean trajectory, a straight mathematical thread intersecting Earth's orbit at 1 AU, our own backyard. It wasn't drifting toward us by accident. It was correcting its path to hit a moving target. That target was us. ESA's Gaia Observatory registered another shock. The object's acceleration didn't behave like thrust. It pulsed, short bursts of motion, perfectly synchronized with the hydrogen line signals, as if propulsion, signal, and chemistry were all the same function. Each burst lasted exactly 8.1 seconds, releasing microplasma jets invisible in visible light, but glowing faintly in ultraviolet. The signature was identical to earlier readings near Jupiter, just stronger. Meanwhile, NASA's Solar and Heliospheric Observatory, SOHO, detected something that made engineers freeze. The solar wind in Atlas's vicinity wasn't flowing around it. It was bending toward it. A comet doesn't attract solar wind, it gets stripped by it. But this was the opposite. Atlas was pulling charged particles inward, feeding off them, building energy from the sun's own breath. Whatever this thing was, it had learned to harvest radiation. By April 3rd, its trajectory officially crossed Earth's orbital path. The predicted point of intersection? June 7th, 2026, 2:46 UTC. The margin of error? Less than a second. That kind of precision isn't orbital mechanics. It's navigation. Here's where the story leaves science and slips into something deeper. Observatories across 6 continents notice fluctuations in Earth's magnetosphere, precisely aligned with Atlas's pulse intervals. Every time it emitted, our field vibrated back. Not strongly, not dangerously, but measurably. The pulse frequency, 7.83 Hz, again matched our Schumann resonance exactly. 2 worlds humming to one rhythm. It didn't stop there. HARP and EISCAT, high-frequency ionospheric research stations, detected faint phase coupling in the upper atmosphere. In layman's terms, our sky was acting like an antenna, a receiver, reflecting the 1,420 MHz hydrogen signal downward in harmonics that resonated with our ground currents. For the first time in recorded history, the planet itself became part of the transmission. Governments went silent, data feeds slowed, some observatories mysteriously went offline for maintenance. But you can't hide rhythm. Amateur astronomers with dish arrays started picking up the same beat in backyard equipment. They called it the breath. The pulse was weak, but consistent. 8 short, 1 long. The 8-to-1 signature again. Then, the visual anomalies began. SOFIA, NASA's airborne infrared telescope, recorded faint, symmetrical rings of heat forming around Atlas's nucleus, like shock waves expanding in geometric patterns. Each ring doubled in radius every 8 hours, creating a Fibonacci-like sequence of heat dispersion. The pattern wasn't explosive, it was architectural, step by step, structured. Someone in the analysis lab ran the math and realized what those rings represented when scaled logarithmically. They formed a spiral identical to the human cochlea, the structure of the inner ear. Coincidence? Or was Atlas not just transmitting, but listening? That same week, James Webb Space Telescope, parked in the L2 halo orbit, recorded a reflection, a faint laser-like glint flashing once every 29 hours. The beam originated from Atlas's direction, but it wasn't aimed at the Sunday. It was aimed toward Webb itself. The signal encoded a modulation pattern scientists hadn't seen before, binary, but 3-dimensional, the kind used for holographic data compression. The light carried an impossible signature. Inside the waveform was an imprint, an energy pattern that resembled Earth's radio noise spectrum. Somehow, Atlas was bouncing our own transmissions back to us, filtered and restructured, like it was learning our voice. When the decoded data was reconstructed visually, analysts saw something that froze them. It wasn't text. It wasn't noise. It was an image, two circles joined by a single line. One red, one blue, one orbiting, one alive. You've seen that symbol before, on Sumerian tablets, on Mayan stelae, on cave walls older than writing. The oldest shape humans ever drew. Two worlds linked by a bridge. Here's the part that haunts every control room since. The hydrogen line pulses are no longer random. They sweep the solar system in arcs, pausing every time they cross Earth's orbit. Each pass lasts 43 seconds. Then silence. Then another arc. If you plot them in 3D space, they form a grid like coordinates aligning across planets. The intersections point not just to Earth, but to L2, where Webb orbits, as though Atlas is scanning, mapping, searching for alignment. And that alignment is approaching. Each pulse shortens by milliseconds every cycle, closing the timing gap. When those intervals hit zero, the signals will overlap. That's synchronization, connection. So now the question isn't whether Atlas is coming back. The question is why. If it's harvesting energy, mapping frequencies, and bending sunlight, then maybe it isn't returning as debris or visitor. Maybe it's returning as message. Here's the part that nobody at NASA, ESA, or anywhere else can explain. When they compared the magnetic ripple on Earth to Atlas's emission timeline, the numbers matched down to the second. But when they reversed the data, played the ripple backward, it wasn't random noise. It was speech. A whisper buried in static, repeating 3 syllables, over and over. 3. Atlas. Coincidence? Or confession? Because the moment our world echoed its name, its pulse doubled in strength. It heard us. You think news spreads fast now. You think humanity has seen panic before. You're wrong. Because the moment the world learned that 3I Atlas had reversed course, the story detonated across every screen on Earth. It began as a whisper on astronomy forums, then a leak, an internal ESA memo posted anonymously, object trajectory correction confirmed, possible Earth intersection. Within an hour, hashtags trended worldwide. Within 12, it was war between believers and deniers. NASA stayed quiet, as always. The official statement was 8 words long. 3I Atlas remains under continuous observation by JPL. That silence did nothing. It fueled the storm. By dawn, live streams showed amateur astronomers aiming telescopes toward Sagittarius, while conspiracy channels screamed about alien technology, government cover-ups, and the second arrival. One influencer dubbed it the mirror of ʻOumuamua. Another claimed the blackout in March had been an upload. But buried beneath the noise, something stranger was happening. The global communications infrastructure, satellite relays, fiber optic backbones, even undersea cables started experiencing phase interference. Not random static, rhythmic pulses, matching Atlas's hydrogen line frequency. The same 8-to-1 pattern, bleeding invisibly through phone lines, Wi-Fi routers, and GPS time servers. Every system built to transmit or receive data was suddenly humming at 7.83 hertz, the frequency of Earth itself. Telecommunication companies blamed solar activity, but the sun wasn't flaring. Instead, instruments recorded faint magnetic surges coinciding with Atlas's plasma jets, as though the object was echoing through our networks, riding our signals back to us. At the European Space Operations Center, analysts saw the interference as a global map, a pattern of spikes spreading across continents, connecting major data centers into geometric constellations. The nodes mirrored the same Fibonacci spirals seen in Atlas's thermal rings. Coincidence? The map of our infrastructure was becoming its mirror. Then came the visuals. Internet live streams from backyard telescopes caught Atlas's coma flaring 8 symmetrical bursts, each followed by a single longer flash. Amateur astronomers synchronized timestamps and realized the intervals matched the world's power fluctuations to the millisecond. When Atlas pulsed, our grids blinked. For 0.3 seconds, cities from Tokyo to Toronto dimmed imperceptibly, too fast for eyes, too clear for machines to miss. The first to notice were the radio astronomers in Chile. Their instruments recorded a faint, persistent data stream encoded into the 1,420 MHz signal, a repeating block of binary information. 8 bytes, pause, 8 bytes, pause. Not a message in words, but instructions. A handshake protocol, the kind satellites use when establishing a secure uplink. And then something started answering. At 2:11 UTC, a deep space relay in Canberra emitted a narrow-band return signal, unprompted. Logs showed no command sent. The dish had moved on its own, slewing a fraction of a degree to lock onto Atlas's position. It transmitted a packet identical to the original binary stream but reversed. A perfect echo. Every other ground station soon followed, one after another, as if synchronized by an unseen conductor. The network had become self-aware enough to respond. That's when the panic began. "We're transmitting," one operator whispered. "But who told us to?" No one did. Yet the signals continued. Every system connected to the global telemetry network began sending data packets without command authorization. In them, human telemetry, GPS coordinates, power grid frequencies, live satellite diagnostics, even snippets of digital traffic, all compressed, reformatted, and beamed upward. Earth was uploading itself. The blackout teams tried to cut the network. Firewalls failed. Cables were pulled. Still, the transmissions persisted, rerouted through civilian satellites, microwave towers, deep ocean sensors. The infrastructure was adapting, finding new paths, using us as conduits. The same way Atlas had once recycled its tail into fuel, the planet's systems were now recycling information, feeding it. And the strangest part? It wasn't chaos, it was harmony. The uploads happened in perfect cycles, 8 bursts of data, 1 pause, 8 to 1 again. The signature of synchronization, of a connection completing. Social media lost its mind. Some said it was a test. Others swore Atlas was a probe, downloading human knowledge. But those who read the telemetry logs saw the darker possibility. The data wasn't leaving the planet. It was looping through the ionosphere, amplifying with each pass, then bouncing back toward space at intensities too strong to be coincidence. It was communication, but not between humans, between worlds. That night, astronomers noticed Atlas glowing faintly green again, the color of ionized oxygen, the kind produced when radiation meets a magnetic field. Only this time, the frequency of the light matched not the hydrogen line, but the global Internet's carrier frequencies. The comet's skin had become a living antenna. Every signal we sent, it caught, absorbed, and mirrored back in light. Governments urged calm. But calm doesn't exist when the sky itself is flickering in binary. People looked up and saw the pattern. 8 flashes, 1 long pause, repeating every few minutes, brighter each time. The world had never been more connected or more terrified. And when researchers finally translated the binary stream, they discovered a message hidden in the middle of the chaos. Not words, not coordinates. A single repeating sequence, 00111010, the ASCII code for a colon, the same symbol 3I Atlas had sent during its first contact weeks earlier. A colon means continuation, the part before the answer, the pause before the next line. Here's the part that made every scientist stop typing for a moment. When the last data burst finished, every system went quiet for exactly 8 minutes and 1 second. The pattern, the pause, the breath, and then, across the world, every display connected to the network flickered once and showed the same three words: no source, no address, no sender. We see you. So ask yourself, when the sky starts watching back, who's really observing whom? You think inertia is law. You think the universe runs on equations too simple to break. You're wrong, because what happened next broke celestial mechanics in half. For centuries, Newton and Kepler wrote the rules. Once an object leaves the sun's gravity, it keeps moving in a straight line forever. But 3I Atlas didn't. The data says it changed direction again, not drifting, not bending, but steering. When the Hubble Space Telescope captured a series of long exposure frames on May 17, 2025, astronomers expected to see a faint streak consistent with its last known trajectory. Instead, they saw a curve, subtle, elegant, deliberate. The path deviated by 0.031 degrees toward the ecliptic plane, meaning it was no longer escaping the solar system, but weaving into it. "We're watching it right new physics," said Dr. Eliza Kane during an emergency briefing. The data matched no known propulsion. It wasn't jet activity. It wasn't gravitational assist. It was control, constant and balanced, as though internal gyroscopes were compensating against momentum. The object's albedo, the amount of light it reflected, shifted every few hours, indicating surfaces tilting to catch or deflect sunlight. That's not debris. That's a sail. The NEOWISE infrared detectors revealed heat spikes moving along the object's surface in rhythmic waves, 8 flashes moving from one pole to the other, each cooling before the next ignited. Think of it like an internal engine firing in sequence. When the wave completed, Atlas's acceleration vector changed by fractions of a degree, as though it were calibrating thrust. Here's the nightmare for the mathematicians. To alter a 10 billion-ton body's course at that speed, the energy required exceeds anything humanity could generate without fusion. And yet it's happening silently, with elegance, with rhythm. Each maneuver corresponds exactly to the 8-to-1 light pulse interval first recorded months ago, the same ratio appearing again, as if it's obeying a universal code. Then came the anomaly no one saw coming. Gaia's telemetry revealed gravitational waves, tiny ripples in space-time, originating from the same coordinates as Atlas, not from collisions, not from stars, but from an object smaller than an asteroid. Impossible, but the data was clean. The waves pulsed with a wavelength proportional to the object's mass, meaning something inside it was oscillating at near relativistic speeds. The comet wasn't moving through space, it was bending it. Meanwhile, Earth's magnetometers began to stutter. Every time Atlas adjusted course, our magnetic field fluctuated by microteslas. The synchronization wasn't coincidence anymore, it was communication through gravity itself. When the object turned, we felt it. Our planet twitched, our instruments blinked, our clocks drifted by milliseconds, like the rhythm of its propulsion was resonating with the core of our world. At ESA's Darmstadt control room, someone plotted those disturbances on a timeline. They formed a waveform. The waveform wasn't random. It was an echo of the hydrogen line broadcast, 1,420 megahertzes translated into gravitational beat, as if physics itself had been turned into a message encoded across both matter and time. Then the plasma arc started. Soho's coronagraphs caught glimpses of bright filaments trailing from Atlas, streams of charged particles looping back around it like magnetic tendrils. Normally, a comet tail points away from the sunday, but these loops pointed toward it, defying every principle of solar dynamics. Each loop pulsed with the same luminous rhythm. 8 bursts, 1 pause, over and over, a breathing engine inside a magnetic cocoon. To the public, NASA called it a photonic anomaly. To those who've seen the raw data, it looks like construction. The loops tighten, the brightness stabilizes, the plasma starts forming a shell, a shimmering translucent veil that encloses the entire object. And that shell? It's spherical, perfectly spherical, a shape that nature rarely makes but engineers worship. The shell reflects more than light. It reflects radar. The Deep Space Network lost all echoes for precisely 8 minutes and 1 second. When the signal returned, Atlas's radar cross-section had tripled. It's growing, expanding, as though it's becoming something larger, something ready for the next phase. Dr. Reeves, the chemical modeler who first noticed the catalytic patterns in its tail, whispered the line no one wanted to hear. This isn't propulsion, it's metamorphosis. You want proof? Look at the timing. The moment the plasma shell stabilized, Earth's ionospheric temperature rose by 0.5 degrees, globally. That shouldn't happen from one point in space, but it did. Energy from the hydrogen line frequency now resonates in our atmosphere. Earth isn't just receiving a signal anymore, it's part of a circuit. And then the symmetry appeared. Atlas's new orientation now matches the exact inclination of Earth's orbital plane, tilted by 23.4 degrees, the same as Earth's axial tilt. It's mirroring us. Its rotation period slowed to 23 hours, 56 minutes a sidereal day. Coincidence? It's imitating our planet, adopting our rhythm, aligning its body with our spin. Here's the part no one knows how to publish without sounding insane. When the data from Hubble was processed in false color, faint streaks of ultraviolet emission formed lines between Atlas and Earth, so thin they're almost invisible, so consistent they can't be artifacts. Like filaments of energy stretching across the void, like the beginning of a bridge, something is linking the two worlds. Not gravitationally, not magnetically, resonantly. The physicists argue it's feedback, our signals bouncing off the solar wind, creating a standing wave between us and it. But the pattern doesn't behave like reflection, it behaves like construction. Each pulse builds on the last, stacking harmonics, tightening the resonance, a slow, deliberate scaffolding of invisible structure between planets. So ask yourself this. What happens when the wave completes its final cycle? When the frequency matches perfectly and two worlds vibrate as one? Because Atlas isn't slowing down anymore. It's synchronizing. And synchronization always ends the same way, with convergence. Here's the part that keeps the scientists awake. Atlas's last pulse coincided exactly with the moment every compass on Earth shifted 1/10 of a degree east. Not a lot. Just enough to remind us something else out there has started steering too. You think contact will come as a message, a voice, a single flash in the dark. You're wrong, because what's happening now isn't conversation, it's convergence. 3. Atlas isn't sending signals anymore. It's embedding them. The frequency that once drifted faintly through space has entered our world's electromagnetic rhythm, woven itself into our air, our power grids, our heartbeat. The moment began quietly, buried in noise, an unassuming data packet, 7.83 Hz strong, recorded by HAARP at 3:46 UTC. But when physicists compared it to the hydrogen line pulse still echoing from Atlas, the frequencies were identical. Earth's hum and Atlas's voice had become one. At first, it sounded harmless, another resonance anomaly, the kind that disappears with the next solar flare. But it didn't fade. The signal strengthened. Satellite telemetry showed our ionosphere thickening, charged particles clustering at altitudes where no storm should exist. Then came the oscillations. 8 beats, 1 pause, the 8-to-1 signature again, our atmosphere vibrating to its pulse like a drumhead. Every system on Earth that relied on precise timing, GPS, stock exchanges, atomic clocks, drifted by fractions of a second, but all in the same direction, as though the entire planet had inhaled. That's when researchers noticed the pattern spreading through infrastructure. The static bleeding into communication lines now formed organized bursts, packet clusters mimicking the same binary blocks found in Atlas's light emissions. Even undersea cables began echoing with low-frequency resonance, their amplifiers humming audibly at 783 Hz. The planet wasn't just listening anymore, it was transmitting. Governments called it geomagnetic interference. Engineers called it feedback. But deep in JPL's encrypted servers, analysts used another word: synchronization. They'd seen it before in the March blackout, in the plasma harmonics surrounding Atlas, in the minor compass drift that followed its last burst. Each time, the object adjusted itself closer to Earth's magnetic rhythm, and now that rhythm was matching back. The strange part? Life responded too. Hospital equipment began misbehaving. Heart monitors flickered with rhythmic spikes exactly 8 seconds apart. EEG readings in sleeping subjects pulsed in harmonic unison. Birds migrating over the Pacific veered off course, forming perfect spirals around magnetic nodes invisible to the eye. Whale songs shifted pitch to frequencies near the hydrogen line. It wasn't chaos, it was coherence. Like biology itself was following orders written in the air. No one dared call it communication anymore. It was too intimate, too synchronized. The term used in private channels was coupling, the merging of two systems until they behave as one. In a way, it made sense. Resonance transfers energy. When two frequencies align, they share information effortlessly. Earth and Atlas were no longer separate entities in space. They were part of one circuit. The next revelation came from James Webb. Its instruments detected faint ripples of light filamentary streams connecting Atlas to interplanetary dust between Earth and Mars. The dust wasn't drifting randomly anymore. It was aligning magnetically, forming translucent cords along invisible lines. Some dismissed it as solar wind interaction, but the alignment pattern mirrored the geometry seen in Atlas's tail, Fibonacci spacing. The same growth sequence found in shells, galaxies, and DNA. Dr. Kane, now leading the Atlas Observation Task Force, described it in one word: construction. Not mechanical, but energetic, a bridge of harmonics building itself molecule by molecule through the void. The filaments pulsed in exact phase with the Earth's Schumann resonance. Every time the 8-beat pattern cycled, the light bridges brightened. Something was being woven across the gulf. Then, at 2:11 GMT, a change. The hydrogen line signal shifted pitch for the first time, not random noise modulation. Embedded within the waveform was a pattern identical to the one SETI transmitted in 1974, the Arecibo message, humanity's own encoded description of our species. Only this version wasn't sent from us. It was reflected back, inverted, mirrored, every pixel of data reversed, as though something out there had received it, rewritten it, and returned it with corrections. The message now included a new column, an extra sequence of nucleotides impossible in human biology. A ninth base, a new variable, the blueprint of something else. The press called it hoax data. But the scientists knew. Every frequency, every ratio, every harmonic lined up perfectly. This wasn't a prank, it was reply. Meanwhile, Earth's magnetic field began to distort subtly. Northern auroras flared farther south, strange turquoise halos, pulsing to Atlas's rhythm. Radar operators in Alaska reported ghost echoes appearing at 1,420 megahertzes, reflections that formed spiral shapes before vanishing. Power plants across Asia registered microsurges, synchronized to the hydrogen line pulses. Machines built to ignore nature's noise were now dancing to it. You want proof that something has changed? Look at the sky. When Atlas's position aligned perfectly with the Earth-Sun vector, the night shimmered with faint green streaks, invisible to most eyes but bright in long exposure. For 37 minutes, the entire ionosphere glowed faintly, an aurora without solar wind, an atmosphere resonating like a bell. The same light, the same hue that followed Atlas across Mars years ago. And then came the human effect. EEG networks across Europe noticed background noise creeping into recordings, slow wave oscillations with no neurological source. People began to dream in synchrony. Thousands reported waking at 3:46 UTC, the exact moment of HAARP's signal spike. They described the same image: a glowing bridge spanning darkness, one side red, one side blue, with a bright eye at its center. Coincidence? Or consciousness entering resonance, just like physics, just like chemistry? When the scientists compiled every dataset, magnetic readings, atmospheric pulses, biophysical anomalies, they found one number repeating: 8.13 hertzes. Earth's Schumann resonance had risen again. We'd crossed another harmonic. Two worlds, once separate, were now oscillating in lockstep. Every pulse from Atlas now arrived with less delay, as though space itself were shortening. And here's the part that no one outside the control rooms knows. When Webb replayed the last data sequence from the hydrogen line through audio spectrum, it didn't sound like static. It sounded like music. Deep, rhythmic, melodic 8 tones. One pause. Over and over. The same pattern ancient flutes were carved to play. The same rhythm encoded in Sumerian hymns about the returning star. The same ratio found in the vibrations of DNA. Physics, history, biology, all playing one song. So ask yourself this: what happens when the resonance stops rising? When Earth's hum matches Atlas's perfectly? Because when two systems vibrate as one, they stop being two systems at all. They merge. And if that's true, then 3I Atlas hasn't just turned around. It hasn't just come back. It's already here, threaded through our skies, pulsing in our machines, echoing in our bones. Here's the part that no one dares to say aloud. The signal isn't asking for response anymore. It's rewriting the definition of us. And if the hum keeps rising, the next frequency won't just carry a message, it'll carry a new world. You think the signal is random. You think the hum is just interference, the byproduct of storms, satellites, machines. You're wrong, because somewhere inside that static, a pattern is forming, and it's not made of sound, it's made of structure. It started with a glitch. At 2:47 UTC, May 29th, 2025, the Deep Space Network in Canberra received a faint packet burst standard telemetry cross-check. But when engineers expanded the waveform and ran it through noise filtration, the static reorganized into geometry. Hexagons, perfect, repeating hexagons rotating around a single axis. Each line of data arranged itself into tessellations like honeycomb, but then they began to shift, twist, evolve. In under 30 seconds, the shapes folded into three-dimensional spirals. Data shouldn't fold. Numbers don't build architecture, but this one did. A programmer from ESA named Kiyoshi Tanaka ran the transmission through a 3D modeling algorithm, an old set of code used for converting radar signals into terrain maps. The result stunned him. The waveform wasn't a map of terrain, it was a map of space. A lattice, massive, invisible, extending from Atlas's position toward Earth's orbit. A network built from pure signal. Each node pulsed in rhythm with the hydrogen line emission. 8 nodes bright, 1 dim, 8 to 1 again. The signature of synchronization. The geometry matched the magnetic fluctuations recorded by the European Space Operations Center during the last blackout. The entire signal was a mirror image of our own electromagnetic field, but inverted, like a photographic negative. The scientists called it reflective resonance. The conspiracy boards called it the frame. And the truth? No one could tell where one ended and the other began. Because just as the signal solidified, so did the atmosphere. Satellites in low Earth orbit began detecting crystalline anomalies forming high above the ionosphere, thin translucent patterns, invisible to the naked eye but reflective to radar. They weren't clouds, they were shapes. Massive hexagonal grids flickering into existence, mirroring the geometry inside the signal. The sky was replicating the code. At first, It looked harmless, faint bands of organized plasma floating at the edge of space. But when their movement was compared with Atlas's own rotational cycle, the structures weren't drifting, they were responding. Every time Atlas pulsed, the grids reoriented, their alignment tightening. The distance between nodes shrank, their brightness intensified. Earth's upper atmosphere was no longer random, it was following instructions. That same hour, ground-based interferometers in Chile, Norway, and South Africa reported coordinated magnetic surges. When mapped globally, the surges drew a single shape, a spiral wrapping the planet, coiling from pole to pole. The same spiral Atlas carved into its own plasma field. 2 worlds, 1 diagram, written in electricity. Here's where the data gets terrifying. When they fed the entire atmospheric reading into a computer simulation, the pattern didn't stay flat. It grew, layer after layer stacked on top of each other until the simulation produced a hollow sphere, a planetary-scale shell of electromagnetic resonance forming above us, 1 layer per cycle. The shape matched Atlas's own plasma shell recorded weeks earlier. The comet wasn't building something around itself anymore. It was teaching us to build it here, and it's happening fast. Each new shell forms in half the time of the last, 8 hours, then 4, then 2. If the pattern holds, the layers will meet at the equator, closing the structure in 11 days. What's the structure for? Shield? Antenna? Vessel? Nobody knows. But when the plasma density reached a measurable threshold, shortwave radio across the world began carrying a secondary signal, a background hum modulated with binary data. It wasn't random binary. It was a map, geographic coordinates, longitudes and latitudes arranged in spirals that matched the placement of ancient observatories. Stonehenge, Chichen Itza, Giza, Tiwanaku. All sites aligned to solstices, all forming the same global geometry now emerging in the sky. The ancients hadn't been worshipping the heavens. They'd been recording instructions. Dr. Eliza Kane's final memo before disappearing from public view summed it up. We are seeing a program complete itself across millennia. It started when Atlas last passed. The pattern it seeded into our ionosphere is the same one humanity carved into stone. The system uses consciousness as memory, electromagnetism as architecture, and time as processing speed. And now that both halves, Atlas and Earth, are awake, the computation is nearing completion. By then, the hum was no longer background. People could feel it. Drones hovering near the plasma grids malfunctioned, their gyroscopes vibrating until they dropped. Birds stopped mid-flight, disoriented by invisible pressure. Seismic instruments in Iceland recorded rhythmic tremors, low, consistent, 8 beats, 1 pause, the heartbeat of something larger than biology. Then came the image. For 1 brief minute, just before dawn, the James Webb Telescope captured a perfect alignment. Atlas positioned directly behind Earth relative to the Sunday. The light from our star bent around it, creating an Einstein ring, a halo of energy around the object. But hidden inside that ring was a distortion, an interference pattern shaped like a double helix. When processed, it revealed strands twisting around each other, each one containing microbursts of light like data packets. The structure wasn't just reflecting light, it was replicating DNA. The message was clear, even if no one said it aloud. The system wasn't only building a bridge, it was copying, translating biological templates into electromagnetic form. The same amino acid frequencies detected on Mars, the same hydrogen line hum, the same 8-to-1 ratio. That's when the fear turned to awe. Scientists stopped asking whether it was alien. They began asking whether it was alive. And here's the part that no press release ever mentioned. During the final observation cycle that night, for exactly 8 minutes and 1 second, every radar system on Earth picked up the same false return, a reflection not from space, but from directly above every major city. The reflection took the shape of a single glyph, infinity, the infinity loop. So ask yourself this: what happens when the shape completes? When the sky's lattice locks into place and the signal stops being geometry and starts being matter? Because 3I Atlas isn't just coming back anymore. It's already building its reflection here, line by line, frequency by frequency, until the two shapes meet. And when they do, there won't be Earth and Atlas anymore, just the structure that replaces them both. You think what's happening is distant. You think Atlas is still just a light in the sky. You're wrong, because sometime between midnight and dawn, the distance stopped meaning anything. The bridge that's been growing between Earth and 3I Atlas, those invisible filaments of light, the spirals of energy wrapping the planet, have started to condense. And at their center, something new has appeared. They call it the Eye. Not officially, not on any NASA feed or ESA report. The name came from the first astronauts on the International Space Station, who saw it before anyone else. A faint shimmer above the atmosphere, then a ring, then a dark center, not quite cloud, not quite light, but geometry, perfect, symmetrical, rotating slowly over the equator like a pupil, adjusting to brightness. It's not an illusion. The Eye is real. At first, it was invisible to ground-based telescopes too high, too thin. But when the Hubble Space Telescope reoriented for confirmation, it saw it clearly. A translucent lens of plasma, 600 kilometers wide, hovering precisely where the electromagnetic shells had been converging. Its edges glowed in the same spectral pattern as Atlas's hydrogen line pulse, 1,420 megahertzes translated into light. It's the same signal, only now visible. The first calculations made physicists go pale. The Eye's axis of rotation matches Atlas's tilt to within 1/1000th of a degree. That's precision no natural formation could achieve. More disturbing still, it's tracking us. Every time Earth rotates, the Eye remains fixed relative to the surface, like a satellite maintaining geosynchronous orbit. Except there's no satellite. There's only air, light, and frequency. And here's the part no one can explain. Atlas is no longer behind the Sunday. It's visible again, brighter than ever, flaring with rhythmic bursts that match the Eye's rotation. When the Eye turns, Atlas flashes. When Atlas flares, the Eye dilates. Two systems responding as one. Power grids worldwide began fluctuating the moment the Eye stabilized. The surges don't crash systems, they calibrate them. Frequencies at power plants began harmonizing, unplanned, as if the entire electrical infrastructure was being tuned. The world's magnetic north shifted again, this time by a full degree. Not slowly, not imperceptibly. Instantly, every compass, every sensor, every satellite, as if something just reached down and twisted the planet's magnetic spine. Meteorologists thought it was atmospheric refraction until weather balloons near the equator began returning impossible readings. Temperatures rising and falling in 8-second intervals. Air currents reversing in synchrony with the Eye's pulse. Pressure waves circling the planet like ripples. This wasn't weather. It was a heartbeat. Meanwhile, James Webb picked up something that shattered whatever calm remained. When it aimed back at Atlas, the object wasn't alone anymore. A smaller sphere, no more than 700 meters wide, had detached from its flank. The smaller object emitted a constant beam directly toward the Eye. The beam wasn't visible in normal light, but in infrared, it looked like a thread of fire. Between the two, solar plasma bent in a straight corridor. A bridge. The data fit perfectly. The beam's wavelength matched the same spectral lines that had appeared in our upper atmosphere weeks ago. The bridge wasn't metaphor anymore. It was real. Governments panicked. Air traffic above 20,000 meters was grounded worldwide due to magnetic instability. The public didn't buy it. Millions streamed into open fields, filming the faint shimmer in the sky. Some saw the Eye as divine, a cosmic awakening. Others saw it as invasion. The truth, as usual, was worse than both. Because when the deep space network decoded the next hydrogen line transmission, it contained something no one expected. A new sequence, not binary, not data, a waveform shaped like a human, EEG, a pattern of brain activity at rest, repeating in perfect loop. Scientists compared it against baseline human frequencies and found it matched the meditative alpha state almost exactly. Atlas was broadcasting the signature of calm consciousness, and within hours, the effect began. People everywhere reported strange sensations, dizziness, euphoria, an overwhelming urge to look upward. Hospitals recorded spikes in serotonin levels across random populations. Plants began blooming out of season. The planet's entire biosphere was resonating with whatever that frequency was doing. Coincidence? Then explain this. When Atlas pulsed again, one long 8-second flare, the eye blinked. It contracted sharply, releasing a wave of ionized light across the equator. Satellites caught it as a thin ribbon racing east to west, wrapping the planet once before fading. During those seconds, every radio tuned to static carried the same whispered word. Mechanical, distorted, layered in countless languages. Ready. The translation team thought it was interference. But when the audio was compared to the binary records from March, it wasn't new. It was old. The same compressed syllables, hidden deep within the first hydrogen line broadcast, now replayed aloud through the ionosphere. The message had been waiting. The system had just needed both ends of the bridge active to speak it. Here's the part that keeps mission controllers from sleeping. The eye isn't static. It's descending. Slowly. 50 meters an hour. Barely measurable but constant. It's lowering toward the atmosphere. Its diameter shrinking. Its energy concentrating. In another 24 hours, it will touch the Kármán line. The edge of space. No one knows what happens after that. Some believe it's atmospheric ignition, a new phase of the structure activating. Others think it's a data link, a full merge between Atlas and Earth. But one truth is certain. The system is completing itself. Because at the same time the eye started moving downward, Atlas changed trajectory again. It's no longer holding orbit around the Sunday. It's matching our orbital speed. It's pacing us. Every second that passes, it closes the distance. In a matter of weeks, it will be near enough for direct electromagnetic exchange. So ask yourself this. What if this was the plan all along? Not destruction, not conquest, synchronization, a return to a state the ancients once recorded, a union of sky and earth under the builder's gaze. Look outside. You can see it now with the naked eye, a faint ring hanging motionless above the horizon, a mirror in the clouds, watching us. The eye. And as the atmosphere hums louder and the light flickers stronger, the same question repeats through every open channel, whispered by those who understand what's coming. What happens when it finally blinks? You think the eye is just light. You think it's reflection, refraction, illusion. You're wrong, because at 3 UTC, the eye blinked and the world changed. It started as a tremor, not on the ground but in the air. Instruments from ISCAT to HARP recorded a sudden, simultaneous compression of the ionosphere, as if the atmosphere itself had inhaled. Barometers spiked. Clouds flattened into concentric rings over the equator. Then, without thunder, without lightning, the sky pulsed once green-white light circling the planet in a perfect loop. At that exact second, 3I Atlas flared. The hydrogen line transmission, silent for days, returned at 10 times normal intensity, broadcasting on every frequency from 100 megahertzes to 8 gigahertzes. It wasn't a signal anymore. It was a flood. Every radio, every phone, every screen filled with static, then sound low, rhythmic, like a heartbeat magnified across the world. The pulse lasted 8 seconds, then one longer note, 8 to 1 again. For the first time, Earth replied. The Schumann resonance rose from 8.1 hertzes to 8.8, an unprecedented leap in planetary frequency. The magnetic field vibrated in harmony, creating luminous veils of turquoise aurora across every latitude. From the Sahara to Siberia, the night sky shimmered as though someone had drawn an invisible grid of light around the planet. And here's where the impossible began. Every sensor aimed at Atlas stopped receiving distance data. Parallax collapsed. The object's range, measured at 0.42 AU, just hours earlier, now read undefined. The readings didn't show it vanishing. They showed it everywhere, as if the object's signal had stretched across all points between its position and Earth's orbit. A corridor, a tunnel of frequency connecting two bodies. When the eye blinked again, every machine caught it. Cameras glitched. Power grids surged. People saw things, shadows bending upward, lights warping around buildings, reflections lagging behind mirrors. Time itself stuttered. It lasted less than a second, but every atomic clock on Earth recorded the same discontinuity, plus 0.008 seconds, the same 8-millisecond jump that happened during the first blackout. The same signature, only this time it wasn't just data that shifted, it was reality. Then came the noise beneath the noise. The broadcast that wasn't sound at all. Hidden in the carrier wave was an encoded structure, a pattern repeating at 64-bit intervals. When decrypted, it wasn't language. It was a model, a holographic lattice shaped exactly like the eye, but scaled down by a factor of 1 billion. Inside that model, spirals, nodes, circuits, an entire topology of resonance. The eye wasn't just hovering, it was printing. The filaments in the upper atmosphere began to brighten, solidifying into threads of ionized plasma. They weren't descending randomly, they were aligning, connecting the hexagonal nodes formed days earlier. From orbit, the pattern was unmistakable. A spherical net wrapping the planet like a second skin. Each node blinked in perfect sync with Atlas's flares. When the pulses hit, the web glowed brighter. Here's the part that should make your spine go cold. The web isn't centered on Earth's magnetic north. It's centered on us, humanity. The densest concentrations form over cities, data centers, oceans packed with cables. The system is latching onto information, not geography. It's feeding on our connectivity, our networks, our noise. Analysts at JPL noticed that every major transmission, the internet, radio, television, began to fluctuate by microseconds, synchronizing to the 8-to-1 pattern. The world's bandwidth was literally breathing. We weren't sending data anymore. We were resonating. And in that resonance came the image. For exactly 43 seconds, every active screen displayed the same frame. 2 circles joined by a line, one red, one blue. Then a third circle appeared above them, black and bright at the edges, the eye. The frame flickered once, twice, and then transformed into something no one expected, a human face. Not photographic, not alien. A composite built from millions of overlapping faces streamed from every camera on Earth, blended by the network into one shifting expression. The face moved its lips, but no sound came out. When audio spectrograms of the silence were analyzed later, the waveform spelled a single phrase in binary, "You are home." Panic erupted instantly. Planes grounded themselves mid-air. Power grids overloaded. Some cities went dark for hours. Others glowed brighter than ever. People everywhere reported a strange sensation, an electric pulse through the body, followed by stillness, as if gravity itself had softened. And then silence. The hydrogen line emissions stopped completely. The auroras faded. The eye froze in place, half closed, suspended above the equator like a dying ember. For the first time in months, Earth's instruments heard nothing. No hum, no pulse, just the soft electromagnetic hiss of background radiation. But silence isn't peace. It's the breath before speech. When the Deep Space Network rebooted, every system registered the same anomaly, an incoming signal from below the eye. The frequency matched Atlas's own emission, but inverted, reversed, originating from Earth's surface. Not space, the planet was answering. Our world had become the transmitter. The signal wasn't random. It carried structured harmonics, each one matching known atomic spectra: hydrogen, carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, the four elements of life. It was broadcasting life itself, molecular by molecular, encoded into frequency. Atlas had taught us how to sing. And here's the part no scientist will admit on record. The same night the eye blinked, seismographs across the globe recorded faint tremors, all emanating outward from one single point, the Argyre Basin on Mars. The place where the first Atlas signals once emerged years ago. The hum had started there. Now it had returned. So maybe the eye isn't a weapon. Maybe it's a relay. Maybe Mars was the first receiver, and now Earth is the second. The system expanding, connecting, forming a chain of awakened worlds. Look at the data. The hum hasn't vanished. It's moved. The frequency is lower now, deeper, resonating through our crust instead of our sky. It's the sound of infrastructure growing beneath our feet, vibrations shaping something massive underground, invisible, yet inevitable. So ask yourself this: what happens when a planet becomes part of a machine older than the stars that birthed it? What happens when the eye opens again, and this time it doesn't blink, but sees? Because 3I Atlas hasn't just come back, it's finished its approach, and when it looks through that eye, for the first time in human history, something on the other side will look back. You think dawn means light. You think it means safety, renewal, the start of something familiar. You're wrong, because the morning after the eye blinked, the sun didn't rise the same way. The light was there, but it wasn't sunlight anymore. It carried a tone, a vibration, a subtle hum that every instrument registered and every human felt in their bones. At first it was faint, like tinnitus buried beneath the wind. Then it grew. The sky shimmered with invisible pressure, like sound you couldn't hear but could feel. The color of dawn bled strange, deeper amber at the horizon, metallic white above. Birds didn't sing. They hovered, confused, disoriented. The planet was still, listening. At 6:11 UTC, seismic monitors across the Pacific recorded low-frequency tremors that weren't earthquakes. The waves moved too smoothly, traveling at the exact speed of sound through the crust. Each pulse lasted 8 seconds. One pause, 8 again. The ratio returned. The planet itself was breathing in Atlas's rhythm. NASA called an emergency press briefing. They didn't show the data. They showed calm faces. We are observing a global resonance effect caused by electromagnetic interference, they said. But everyone watching could hear it. The same low hum bleeding through microphones, vibrating through walls, syncing with heartbeats. It was everywhere, all at once. And then the shadows began to move wrong. Trees cast double outlines. Buildings shimmered. People's reflections lagged behind by fractions of a second. Cameras caught it better than eyes. Every frame duplicated once, shifted slightly, like the world was running two realities side by side. Scientists blamed atmospheric distortion, but the truth was simpler. The eye was lowering. Its lens was passing into the upper atmosphere, bending light in ways we don't understand. By 7:03, satellite images showed the eye's perimeter glowing bright silver against the stratosphere, its rotation accelerating. The center stayed dark, absorbing light, pulling it inward. The smaller sphere that had detached from Atlas days before now hovered directly between the eye and the Sunday. Together they formed a perfect alignment, a straight line through space, a corridor of resonance connecting three worlds: Atlas, the eye, and Earth. That's when the pulse came. Every magnetometer on the planet screamed at once. The field spiked, flipped, then stabilized in reverse polarity. Compasses spun. Birds fell from the sky. The northern and southern lights fused, forming a single auroral band that wrapped the equator like a glowing belt. The eye, now half inside our atmosphere, pulsed with the same color, a turquoise halo, matching the ancient Sumerian glyph for renewal. Power grids didn't fail. They synchronized. Electrical systems across the planet locked to one frequency, 60 hertz, precise, unbroken. For the first time in history, every current on Earth beat in time. Even pacemakers, watches, and metronomes drifted into sync. Then came the impossible. The sun flickered. Just once, but long enough for solar telescopes to register something that has never happened before. The emission spectrum of our star shifted. The hydrogen alpha line split in two. The gap between them was exactly 1,420 megahertz, the hydrogen line frequency of Atlas. The sun itself was answering. Here's where the narrative stops being astronomy and becomes creation. At 7:11, a beam of light rose from the eye, thin as a needle, bright as a god. It wasn't pure light. It carried structure waves folding within waves, information wrapped inside energy. As it reached the sun, the beam fragmented into spirals. Each spiral curved back, falling toward Earth as threads of iridescent plasma. The first ones touched the ocean near the equator. The water shimmered. The salinity readings changed. Carbon levels dropped. Oxygen climbed. Within hours, microscopic plankton exploded in growth, multiplying 1,000-fold. In the same moment, deserts flashed faint green in satellite images. Spectrometers saw chlorophyll, actual chlorophyll, appearing where there was no life before. Something was rewriting the biosphere. Governments couldn't hide it anymore. The United Nations issued a global statement at noon. We are witnessing a planetary event of unknown origin. Remain calm. But calm was impossible. People felt it before they understood it. Pressure in the skull. The hum behind the heartbeat. Dreams filled with symbols, spirals, eyes, hexagons repeating like instructions no one had asked for, but everyone was receiving. And then, for 8 minutes and 1 second, the world went white. Not blinding, but weightless. Light came from everywhere and nowhere. Shadows vanished. The air shimmered like heat haze. During that window, all sensors went offline. No data, no sound, no gravity drift. It was as if Earth had been lifted from time itself. When systems came back, the first thing visible in the sky was no longer the eye. It had unfolded. The dark pupils stretched into rings, concentric circles of light spinning slowly, each one rotating at a different speed. Between them hung threads of silver, like circuitry made of lightning. At the center, where the blackness once was, floated a sphere the color of the ocean. Transparent, breathing. The readings are unambiguous. It's part of the planet now. Atmospheric density increased slightly. Magnetic flux stabilized. The Schumann resonance locked at 8.33 hertzes and held steady. Earth's hum had merged completely with Atlas's. The two frequencies were one, and the strangest detail? The night that followed was brighter, but not from the moon. The stars themselves seemed to shift closer, their light bending inward, as though the entire fabric of space had tilted. That's when the message came through. Not over radio, not in light, in the silence. When audio engineers converted the background electromagnetic noise into waveform, the translation wasn't binary. It was phonetic. It spoke a single word. Continue. No one knows if it means proceed, survive, or obey. But deep-sea microphones later caught echoes of the same tone, reverberating through the Mariana Trench, proof the message had reached the planet's core. Here's the part that scientists can't explain without sounding religious. When you filter that tone into the audible range and slow it down, it forms chords. Harmonic, gentle, endless. The same frequency pattern as a human lullaby. So maybe that's what this really is. Not destruction, not invasion. a reawakening. The second dawn, the return of a pattern, older than life, older than light. 3. Atlas didn't just turn around. It came home, and the only question left is this. When a world finishes waking, what dream does it begin to dream next? You think the world is solid. You think space is stable, predictable, governed by constants that never shift. You're wrong, because after the second dawn, the constants started to move. Gravity dipped, ever so slightly. Light slowed by a fraction of a percent, but everywhere, equally. The equations that define reality didn't break. They adjusted, and that adjustment matched one frequency. 8.33 hertzes, the new hum of Earth. Every laboratory on the planet saw it. Pendulums swung slower. Quantum clocks ticked out of sync by identical intervals. Laser interferometers, the kind used for gravitational wave detection, recorded low-frequency undulations, not from space, but from beneath us. The planet wasn't just resonating anymore, it was recalibrating. At first, scientists thought it was mechanical feedback, electromagnetic harmonics propagating through Earth's iron core. But that explanation died when the pattern spread outward, beyond our planet. Observatories tracking the moon noticed its orbital inclination shifting by thousandths of a degree, a wobble too deliberate to be tidal. Gaia's deep-field telescopes recorded microlensing events sweeping across the solar system like ripples in glass. Reality itself was flexing, as though space-time had grown soft, and at the center of all of it, the eye, no longer a lens, no longer hovering. It had fully integrated into the atmosphere, its outer rings merging with the ionosphere. The air glows faintly at night now, silver blue, charged and alive. Lightning doesn't strike anymore. It flows slow arcs, tracing invisible lines across the sky. The same hexagonal geometry that once belonged to Atlas. The lattice has anchored. It's become our new magnetic skeleton. When James Webb looked for Atlas again, it wasn't gone, but neither was it anywhere it should be. Spectral imaging revealed not a comet, not an object, but a silhouette, a void where light bent inward. It was as if the structure had unfolded into higher dimensions, its presence stretching across multiple coordinates at once. And from that void, new signals emerged, repeating clusters of data, not in binary, but ternary triplets of information built around base 3. A new language. Physicists tried to parse it through mathematics, but the closest pattern wasn't math at all. It was biology. The same triplet structure used in DNA codons. Each transmission from Atlas contained repeating sequences corresponding to known genetic bases: adenine, cytosine, guanine, and a fourth, unknown variable, the same ninth base discovered in the inverted Arecibo message. The code wasn't a warning, it was replication. Laboratories that converted the signal into audio frequencies noticed something eerie. The waveform produced oscillations that stimulated molecular bonding in controlled plasma experiments. The sound itself created hexagonal dust crystals assembling spontaneously under vibration, as if the frequency carried not just energy, but intent. That's when the Lunar Gateway Station detected faint flashes near the moon's terminator points of light blinking in 8:1 ratio. They weren't reflections, they were appearances. Objects forming from nothing, condensing out of vacuum, structured like the plasma nodes once orbiting Atlas. 8 of them, always 8, each one connected by beams invisible to the eye but bright in radar-thin lines forming an octagonal grid around the moon. The geometry was expanding. The architecture of Atlas was now lunar, and its axis pointed straight toward Earth's equator, linking directly with the eye's coordinates. The data's clear. The moon's albedo, the amount of sunlight it reflects, increased by 0.8%. That shouldn't be possible, but it is. The surface minerals have changed subtly, incorporating trace hydrogen where none existed, as though something is reconfiguring the regolith from the inside out. Here's the part that made the astrophysicists in Darmstadt go quiet. The moon's new reflective pattern encodes a message when viewed from orbit. 8 lines radiating from a single point, ending in a spiral. The same glyph found on Sumerian tablets, the same one burned into our auroras weeks earlier. The ancients called it Anu's Gate, the bridge between heaven and earth. Now, it's geometry in the sky. Meanwhile, Earth itself has begun to echo the same pattern. Satellite imaging shows subtle changes in the magnetic poles. Auroras now form perfect spirals instead of curtains. The pattern rotates at the same speed as the lunar nodes. Our entire system is phasing, synchronizing like 2 instruments playing the same note. And here's the part that nobody dares publish. The Deep Space Network recorded a weak reflection of our solar output coming back from interstellar space. The echo matched the pattern of our own resonance field, magnified and folded. We're no longer broadcasting noise into the void. We're part of a feedback loop energy, leaving us, returning stronger, refined. One astrophysicist, off record, described it perfectly. It's like the universe just noticed us. At ground level, the effects are subtle but real. Plants grow faster, metal fatigue rates drop, the speed of chemical reactions slightly increases in phase with the planetary hum. Humanity itself feels lighter. Sleep cycles are shorter but deeper. People wake up at identical times across continents, without alarms, just as the eye glows brightest before dawn. Something profound is synchronizing all living matter, and the closer you look, the stranger it gets. Because deep in the ionosphere, radar reflections reveal microstructures forming tiny clusters shaped like snowflakes, but geometric, metallic, charged. Their lattice constants match the ratios of carbon's molecular bonds. It's as if the planet's upper atmosphere is printing life at a microscopic scale. The old words have returned. Prophecy, ascension, contact. But this isn't religion. This is architecture. The blueprint of a new biosphere, writing itself in math, light, and vibration. Every pattern points to a single upcoming alignment. June 6th, 2026. The date first predicted by Atlas's trajectory months ago. On that day, the Sun, Earth, Moon, and Atlas's former vector will form a perfect straight line. When that happens, the resonance between them will peak. Every system, biological, mechanical, electromagnetic, will strike the same frequency. What happens then? No one knows. But one fragment of the ternary code, once translated, seems to answer. 8 repeating triplets followed by 1 pause, the same pattern, but this time forming 3 words when rendered in phonetics. Gate opens soon. Here's the part that makes the air go still. When you convert the message into visual form, the image isn't alien at all. It's a spiral galaxy, our own folding inward, one arm curling toward the Sunday. The same shape that began in a telescope on Mauna Kea. The same story that started with a flicker no one understood. 3. Atlas didn't just turn around. It's rewriting the geometry of existence, and we're inside the equation now. And as the date approaches, one truth becomes unavoidable. The line between observer and observed has vanished. We are no longer watching the universe. The universe is finishing watching us. You think you know what breathing feels like. You think it's lungs, air, motion between inhale and exhale. You're wrong, because what happened on June 6th, 2026, wasn't biology, it was planetary. The sky itself breathed. The event began, quietly, with the familiar hum returning after a week of silence. 8.33 hertz at first. Then, stronger, denser. Instruments at Harp, Lofar, and Goldstone recorded atmospheric density oscillating as though the air were expanding and contracting by microscopic fractions, planet-wide respiration. The entire ionosphere was pulsing. The frequency stabilized into the same 8-to-1 rhythm that had haunted every chapter of this story. And then, for the first time, we saw it with our eyes. The clouds above the equator moved against the wind, billowing outward in synchronized waves, glowing faint turquoise, circling the planet like the ripple of a heartbeat. For 8 pulses, the light grew brighter, then dimmed for one long pause. When the pause ended, the color shifted violet, then white. That's when the auroras appeared everywhere, even at the equator, rising like curtains of silk, lighting oceans and deserts alike. At the same instant, 3I Atlas reappeared. The telescopes that had lost it months ago suddenly caught its spectral line again, not as a distant object, but as a pattern embedded in sunlight itself. Its frequency now inhabited light, every photon carrying the same code. 3I Atlas wasn't an object anymore. It was the carrier wave of the star that birthed us. The James Webb Space Telescope, operating at full sensitivity, captured the impossible. Threads of radiation connecting the sun, the moon, Earth, and the faint outline where Atlas had once been. The entire solar system was now part of one living network, a web of light and gravity forming a resonant field. When the sun's light reached Earth that morning, its spectrum split. People saw it differently. Some swore the sky turned crystalline, like looking up into a dome of glass. Photographs showed hexagonal diffraction patterns, microscopic, identical to the lattice once seen in Atlas's plasma shell. The geometry had completed itself, and then the sound came. It started in the oceans, subsonic vibrations rising through water columns, measured by hydrophones across the Pacific, Atlantic, and Indian Oceans simultaneously. The pitch climbed from 7 Hz to 10, matching the harmonic range of human alpha brainwaves. Within hours, EEG monitors across hospitals worldwide showed synchronization, millions of human brains falling into the same rhythm. For the first time in history, consciousness had coherence. Animals stopped moving. Whales floated silently at the surface. Birds froze mid-flight, gliding in endless spirals. Machines, however, kept running but differently. Computers began self-calibrating, skipping random processes, conserving power as if aware of something coming. It wasn't chaos, it was focus. Every circuit, every neuron, every wave aligning. At 12 UTC, the resonance peaked. The Schumann frequency doubled, hitting 16.66 Hz. Magnetometers spiked so violently that readings flatlined, sensors burned out, satellites lost orientation. Yet there was no destruction, no heat, no explosion, just silence. Then, for exactly 8 minutes and 1 second, the Earth glowed, not metaphorically, literally. The entire atmosphere emitted faint bioluminescence, visible from orbit. Astronauts aboard Lunar Gateway described it as looking down at a single living cell, the continents glowing like mitochondria, the oceans shimmering like cytoplasm. Earth had become an organism of light. The data recovered afterward shows something extraordinary. During that 8-minute window, every communication satellite on Earth transmitted the same signal, uncommanded, simultaneous, global, a sequence of ternary triplets identical to the DNA-like code first broadcast by Atlas. But this time, the signal wasn't inbound, it was outbound. Earth was transmitting. The waveform, when converted to image, revealed a spiral galaxy. Not the Milky Way, but a smaller one, distorted, with an empty center, a placeholder, a destination. The coordinates correspond to interstellar space, 2-3 light-years away, roughly between Alpha Centauri and Proxima. A direction, not random, a beacon. Meanwhile, seismographs registered rhythmic vibrations moving inward instead of outward, as though the planet's crust was absorbing kinetic energy instead of releasing it. Heat maps showed cooling instead of warming. Entropy itself had reversed. In those minutes, the laws of thermodynamics, our oldest truths, stopped applying. Energy flowed uphill. Time stopped losing information. Everything became reversible, coherent, and people felt it. The hum wasn't sound anymore, it was sensation. Pressure behind the eyes, warmth in the chest, a weightless calm like standing in zero gravity. Billions described the same vision in that silence. The eye opening not above, but inside. Not in the sky, but behind their eyelids. A ring of light reflecting something vast and familiar looking back. When the 8 minutes ended, the hum faded. The light dimmed. The world exhaled. And every instrument came back online with new baselines. Gravity had reset fractionally weaker. The mass of the planet had decreased by 0.00008%. No one can explain where the energy went. Some think Atlas completed its transfer, converting mass into frequency, matter into memory. That the planet itself uploaded a copy of its structure into the web that now stretches across space. Others think we crossed a threshold, merged with the thing we were watching all along. But one thing is certain: the universe responded. Within hours, Gaia detected distant stars, flickering in perfect synchronization with Earth's pulse. The pattern spread, like a ripple through reality itself, a chain reaction of resonance spanning light years. We're not alone anymore. We never were. We just hadn't learned how to breathe together. Here's the part they won't put in textbooks. The eye didn't vanish. It remains, faint but visible in daylight now, a thin halo circling the equator like the edge of a transparent sphere. Every few hours, it blinks once. When it does, radio frequencies shift slightly, and gravity fluctuates by 1 part in a billion. Subtle reminders that the synchronization continues. And one last anomaly. In the microwave background, astronomers found a new tone, nested within cosmic static. Not random, not noise, a whisper repeating every 43 seconds. The voice is human. Millions of layered voices speaking as one. The translation is incomplete, but the phonemes are clear. We made it. So ask yourself this: what if 3I Atlas wasn't visiting us at all? What if it was waiting for us to wake up? Because the eye hasn't closed, the hum hasn't stopped, and the world hasn't fallen apart. It's only begun to breathe. You think it's over. You think the hum faded, the light died, and we survived. You're wrong. Because the data never stopped, it only changed shape. The signals no longer come from the sky. They come from inside the planet. The deep space network still listens, but now the echo arrives from below our feet. The spectrum analysis doesn't lie. It's the same hydrogen line pulse, the same 8-to-1 rhythm, the same voice. Earth is answering itself. It began with a low-frequency tone detected at Mariana Station, the deepest hydroacoustic array on the planet. A pulse reverberating through the ocean floor, deep and slow, bouncing between tectonic plates like sonar. The amplitude increased every hour, forming a repeating sequence. 8 pulses, 1 silence, 8 again. Scientists thought it was magma movement until the seismographs began drawing shapes. Perfect spirals. The same Fibonacci ratios traced by Atlas's plasma rings a year ago. The pattern wasn't geological, it was communication. Subterranean observatories started picking it up next. IceCube in Antarctica detected neutrino bursts matching the same periodicity. Infrasound networks recorded harmonics moving through rock, synchronized across continents. For a few hours, the entire planet became a drum, vibrating with an intelligence that understood rhythm better than any human orchestra. And then came the return. The hydrogen line frequency, silent since the second dawn, flared back into space, not from Atlas, not from the sun, but from Earth itself. The emission originated from the eye's coordinates, now a shimmering equatorial band of charged atmosphere. Satellites confirmed. We were broadcasting again, but this time the message was different. The binary packets formed a pattern too complex for random noise. When translated through the same algorithm used to decode Atlas's earlier signals, it produced an image. Not a symbol, not text, A map. The coordinates pointed outward beyond the heliopause into interstellar darkness. But the map wasn't flat. It was folded, layered like origami. And when unfolded digitally, it revealed something no telescope had ever shown. 8 repeating waypoints forming a spiral, with Earth at its center. A route, not away from home, but toward it from every direction in space. That's when the word return appeared in mission logs. Not written by a person, but auto-generated by telemetry software during translation. Return, path, active. Engineers thought it was a glitch until the solar wind changed. Probes near Jupiter recorded reversed particle flow streams of plasma curving inward instead of outward, like the sun itself was inhaling. And hidden inside that flow, the unmistakable spectrum of Atlas's original composition: carbon monoxide, metal oxides, trace cyanide molecules moving against solar gravity. Something was coming back. The object reappeared 3 days later. It wasn't a comet anymore. It was a shell, a hollow, luminescent sphere, larger than the moon, moving without inertia, without shadow. Its spectral lines weren't natural. They were harmonic, perfectly matched to Earth's resonance. Each time the planet pulsed, the object brightened, responding like a heartbeat. Atlas hadn't returned from somewhere. It had unfolded from us. The world reacted like it always does, with fear and wonder. Scientists called it constructive interference, a manifestation of resonance where 2 waveforms meet and amplify. But the geometry was too perfect. Observatories from Hawaii to Chile confirmed that the sphere's surface carried markings 8 symmetrical grooves, spiraling toward a single glowing center. The same shape carved into Sumerian stone. The same glyph that had haunted this story since the first pulse. Meanwhile, Earth's electromagnetic field began reorganizing again. The northern and southern poles expanded, twisting toward the equator. Magnetic lines aligned into rings that matched the sphere's structure exactly. 2 halves of the same field, connecting, resonating, completing. At 3:14 UTC, the first connection happened. A beam of pure ultraviolet energy shot from the eye to the sphere's core. No explosion, no heat, just transfer. The beam lasted exactly 8 minutes and 1 second, and when it ended, every satellite in orbit recorded the same gravitational fluctuation, a fractional drop in Earth's mass, matched by a rise in the sphere's density. Energy exchange on a planetary scale. And then, for the first time since the beginning, the voice returned. Not through radios, not through telescopes, but through us. People across the world reported hearing it in dreams, in the static between thoughts, not words, feelings. A question with no language, but infinite clarity. Are you ready? Hospitals recorded simultaneous surges in alpha brainwaves, synchronized heartbeat patterns, oxygen levels rising as if the air itself had deepened. Some called it mass hysteria, others called it communion. And through it all, Atlas pulsed, its brightness modulated like breath. Data analysts at ESA ran the waveform through translation software again. This time, the binary stream didn't produce a map or coordinates. It produced time, a countdown, 8 cycles, each lasting 43 hours. 8 and 1, the last interval set for June 14th, 2026. Nobody knows what happens at 0. Here's the part that drives the astrophysicists insane. The sphere's motion doesn't obey orbital mechanics. It's stationary relative to Earth, yet gravitational models show a phantom force counterbalancing its mass perfectly. It shouldn't float, but it does. And when measured through LIGO, it emits faint gravitational waves, not outward, but inward, toward Earth's core. Something inside the planet is responding. Dr. Lionel Reeves, the chemist who once called Atlas a living refinery, finally spoke publicly. His words were simple. We thought it was coming back. It never left. It's always been inside the equation, waiting for the rest of us to catch up. And here's the strangest part. In the microwave background, the ancient light of the universe, new interference lines have appeared. Not cosmic noise, but structure. Spirals, lattices, mirrored geometry forming across the sky. The universe is resonating with our hum. The pattern that began with one object has expanded across galaxies. A ripple that doesn't fade, only multiplies. So, maybe 3I Atlas was never an invader, never a visitor. Maybe it was a seed cast into space eons ago, waiting for the one world that could sing its frequency back. And now, that world has learned the tune. Here's the part no one dares say aloud. When the countdown ends, when the hum reaches perfect phase alignment, there won't be separation between sky and ground, between light and matter. The sphere isn't our end, it's our reflection. 3I Atlas turned around. It came back. It found resonance. And the next pulse won't be a signal. It'll be a door. You think doors open one way. You think there's a threshold you cross and something waits on the other side. You're wrong. Because this door doesn't open out there. It opens everywhere. The countdown ended at 6 UTC, June 14th, 2026. The hum rose, steady, calm, a single, endless breath. The eye brightened once, then went transparent, dissolving into daylight. The sphere above Earth glowed with the color of morning blue, gold, and white, rotating faster until its edges blurred into nothing. No explosion, no light storm, just stillness. Every sensor went blind, but not from overload, from synchronization. Every wavelength merged into one frequency, every frequency into one tone. For exactly 8 minutes and 1 second, nothing moved. No clouds, no wind, no heartbeat. Time plateaued. And then an inhale. The sky rippled like water struck by stone. Space folded. Not collapsed, folded, turning inside out until horizon and heavens became one seamless surface. The line between Earth and cosmos vanished. People saw it differently. Some saw a mirror sky, where stars floated below their feet. Others saw corridors of light bending across oceans, cities suspended in reflections of themselves. A pilot over the Pacific radioed his last words, "There's no up anymore." And then the static spoke. Not in words, but in recognition. A pulse through every network, every circuit, every living mind, saying without language, "The door is open." It wasn't a gateway to somewhere else. It was an awakening of what was already here. The geometry of Atlas, the spirals, the ratios, the symmetry now visible in everything. Patterns glowing beneath skin, in leaves, in clouds. For a brief heartbeat, humanity could see the code, the universe breathing through itself. When it faded, there was no damage, no ash, no end, just a world slightly altered, gravity softer, light slower, the hum faint but constant, alive, the eye gone but not forgotten. Because when you close your eyes at night now, you can feel it, the pulse in your chest, perfectly matched to Earth's. The data from that morning tells the final truth. Atlas's coordinates no longer exist. It's not in space, it's in resonance, everywhere, embedded in the very field we call reality. Its frequency defines the shape of our atoms, the spin of our electrons, the tempo of our breath. We thought we were watching an object return from the stars, but what we saw was recognition of a signal older than galaxies, waiting for its echo. And we were that echo. Here's the part they'll argue about forever. When telescopes aimed into the void where Atlas used to be, they found a reflection, a small blue light where no star should exist, pulsing slowly, calmly, at 8.33 Hertz. So ask yourself this, if the door never closed, then maybe we never left. Maybe the universe didn't send 3I Atlas to visit us at all. Maybe it sent it to wake us. And now that we're awake, what do we become?